Hi everyone, welcome back to the Stitches and Scribbles channel. My name is Erin and I have a book podcast for you today. I did not acquire any books in the month of October, at least not that I can remember off the top of my head. I might have picked up a few from little libraries, but I didn't do any big book purchases this month. I did partially get out of my reading slump. I did a lot better than I have for the last couple months, which is great. But a lot of the books I read were either digital or I have already let someone else borrow them or put them in a little library. Maybe, I don't know if I have any that I got rid of this month, but a lot of digital books or books that I borrowed from somebody else, I think, is the category for that. But without further ado, let's jump into what I read. The first book I read in October was The Book Swap by Tessa Bickers. This was one that I got, will it focus? There we go, now you can see it. This is one that I got from my public library through Libby. And this one I purely picked out because I was looking for things that were immediately available. And this one was available. So it was a contemporary romance, just something light, easy to read. I gave it 3 stars because it ended up not being my favorite. But here's the synopsis. Still reeling from a recent tragedy, Erin Connolly knows she needs to start living, but has no idea how. When she accidentally donates her favorite book, a heavily annotated copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, containing a memento she can't be without, to a local little free library, she's devastated. But then the book turns up a week later, back in the library with fresh notes in the margins, along with an invitation and a copy of Great Expectations to meet her newfound pen pal. A life-changing conversation written only in the margins of beloved classic books begins between Erin and her mystery man. Following each other through the pages of their favorite novels as the book exchange continues, they both begin to open up, falling into a friendship and maybe something more. But Erin and her pen pal have a shared history that neither of them has guessed. Faced with painful reminders of the past and the one person she swore never to forgive, Erin finds herself at a crossroads, one that could change her life forever. So, I loved the gimmick of this story that A, it's contingent on a little free library, which I love, and B, that they're kind of passing notes back and forth to each other in books. As much as I, as a person, hate annotating books, I do think it was a cute literary device in this case. Here's where my criticisms come in for this book. First of all, I know I'm picky about my rom-com books. I have a lot of things that I prefer not to read in those. And one that I kind of discovered while reading this is I kind of don't like it when a character has a random one-night stand seemingly for no reason. I believe this happened fairly close to the beginning of the book where the main character, Erin, chose to have someone stay over for the night. And it felt very random. It felt not really necessary to the plot. So I didn't love that scene was in there, especially so close to the beginning of the book. I only stuck with it because I wanted to see where the little library plot line ended up. 2, I think enemies to lovers can be done well as a book trope, and I wouldn't even say that this is fully in that category. But it's not my favorite. I don't love that trait, especially when one of the characters has done something so truly awful that it should not be something that's forgiven. And I also don't think that was the case in this book, but it verged heavily on the, like, I just don't think these two would end up together long term if they were real people. The plot device was cute, but I think in general, like, someone who has done something so deeply hurtful to you in the past is not a good choice in a long-term partner. So those are my thoughts on it. I know a lot of people love that plot device of enemies to lovers or like second chance romance, if that's more this category. I don't like it, which is really funny considering the title of the next book, which was The Second Chance Hotel by Sierra Godfrey. Let the camera focus on that one a little bit, maybe. There we go. This was another contemporary romance that I again picked from Libby just because it was available. And this one I liked a lot better, so I'm glad that I finished it after the other one. This one, even though it has second chance in the title, it's not a second chance romance. It is a accidental marriage romance book, which is not something you typically find in contemporary romance. I would say that if you like My Big Fat Greek Wedding and like really goofy banter between characters, this would be a good book for you. Here's the description. It's all fun and games until you accidentally marry a stranger in Greece and inherit a hotel. Amelia Lang's life is kind of a mess. She's stuck living at home with her narcissistic mother. Her tech bro ex-boyfriend deliberately sabotages her at work and she gets fired after throwing a mug at his head. It's okay, she missed. Then she has a major falling out with her best friend. So Amelia does what Amelia does best. She runs away. After traveling around Europe for 3 months, she settles on a small Greek island to reset her life and figure out what's next. But after too much Ritsina, she gets tricked into marrying James, another guest at the hotel who's perfectly nice but perfectly boring. To top it off, they are gifted the very hotel they're staying in, a hotel they don't want that is in desperate need of some TLC. They agree to keep the hotel open through the busy summer season for the sake of the island's quirky but well-meaning residents, after which Amelia plans to return home to start rebuilding her disastrous life. Amelia and James must work together to determine how to get out of their situation. Easier said than done for Amelia, who started to feel a strong spark of attraction for James. But Amelia is sure her real life is waiting for her back in San Francisco. Is it time for Amelia to return home, or could this be the second chance at a new life she didn't know she wanted? This book was adorable. I gave it 4 stars. This one, I think one of the big appeals to it for me was just how detailed the author was in creating believable characters. All of the characters in this book I loved, even like the quirky townsfolk, even some of the intentionally unlikable quirky townsfolk. It felt like maybe My Big Fat Greek Wedding meets like Gilmore Girls was a good comparison for these two. Obviously it has the element of Greek culture, which I thought was really fun. And I also liked kind of watching the characters figure out how to run a hotel when that's something that neither of them are experienced in. But this was a really great quick read. And I would say especially if you're looking for a book to like read on the plane or during travel, this is a really, really good fit for that. I loved it. The next book I read was one that I read during Adoration. I explain this in almost every episode of this podcast, but I am practicing Catholic and I go to Adoration once a week. And I typically like to read a religious book during Adoration time because that's the best way for me to stay focused and present the whole time that I'm there. So this book that I read was called A Hiker's Guide to Purgatory by Michael Norton. And this is one that I actually borrowed from my mom to read. And I gave this one 5 stars. This one was one that I was looking forward to reading for a while. It is a fiction Catholic book, but I think it had some really amazing points to it. Here's the description. One morning, attorney Dan Geary, 77 years old, finds himself in the middle of a rolling polychrome landscape. The greens are bold and bright, birds sing in the distance, tall grasses surge like a sea before the wind. He has never seen anything quite like it, but somehow, with the doctors and beeping monitors suddenly gone, he knows exactly where he is, the afterlife. What a relief not to be floating on a cloud playing a harp. Instead, a hiking pack full of gear sits on his back, and he feels the familiar itch to start walking toward the far-off mountains. But he finds there is no trail, no map, no signage, and no one else in sight. As gorgeous as the scenery is, Dan feels in his bones, this is purgatory. Growing up, he'd imagined purgatory as a detention center for delinquent children. What a surprise to see its beauty and to feel so much hope. Yet along the winding way, Dan starts recognizing his tangled, imperfect, often wasted life, and he wonders if he will ever really be ready to meet God. With no clue how long his hike will take, he gradually learns, through memories and through encounters with other heaven-bound hikers, how to desire the good, how to wait, and how to long for love. With confessional honesty and a sense of humor, this book reimagines purification of the afterlife as a tough journey saturated with faith, hope, and love, and with overwhelming beauty. I loved this book. I think it was such a fantastic way to visualize this faith concept. I would also argue that it's a good book even if you're not Catholic and don't have this particular belief about the afterlife. It's so well imagined and feels so real, and I really got a lot out of it. So I would highly recommend it, especially if you're looking to kind of get into Catholic fiction. I think this is a really good, fairly short Catholic fiction book to get you started, but I really, really enjoyed this one. The next one I read was another adoration book. This one was also very short. It was Blessed Carlo Acutis, A Saint in Sneakers, and this was a non-fiction Catholic book about St. Carlo Acutis. And Carlo Acutis, if you don't know, is a recently canonized saint. He was only canonized in October of this year, in 2025. And he's one that I've kind of personally adopted into my classroom since I teach technology at school. And we've had a lot of fun learning about Carlo Acutis this year. So I read this to kind of give myself a little bit more background about his life. Although I don't think that this would be a great book for little kids to read, it's certainly fine for teenagers. Here's the description. How does a boy from Milan who only lived to the age of 15 become a global influencer for God more than a decade after he died? Discover the inspiring story of Blessed Carlo Acutis, he's now Saint Carlo Acutis, the first millennial to be beatified by the Catholic Church. This tech-savvy teen has shown the world that computer coding and video games are not mutually exclusive with sainthood. Born in the same year as the launch of the World Wide Web, Carlo has been hailed by the Pope for providing a witness to holiness in our digital age at a time when Christians are still grappling with how best to live out their faith in the world of laptops, cell phones, and social media. From a young age, Carlo's enthusiasm for God was contagious. He called the Eucharist "my highway to heaven," and was eager to tell anyone who would listen about the incredible reality of Jesus' presence in the world, hidden in our neighborhoods under the appearances of bread and wine. Vatican journalist Courtney Maris traveled the footsteps of Acutis in Italian cities of Milan and Assisi to write this biography, which weaves storytelling with well-researched reporting to tell the inspiring story of a modern saint. Drawing on the testimonies of the numerous lives changed by Carlo, this book paints a portrait of Carlo as seen through the eyes of his family, friends, teachers, and classmates. This book features a section on 7 Eucharistic miracles, bringing you to Catholic pilgrimage sites in Europe that were photographed by Carlo for an exhibition that has traversed the globe. It also includes the story of the medical miracle attributed to Acutis' intercession, the healing of a young boy in Brazil in 2013. This work documents how a boy who did not seek out any attention for himself while he was alive has gone viral in the years after his death. It is the story of a spiritually rich life lived as an ordinary kid. Filled with testimonies from millennials and Gen Z Catholics, this book shows how Carlo's story is continuing to inspire generations of young people by showing that we are called to something greater than endless scrolling on a smartphone and that it is possible to be a saint today. So this was an excellent book. I gave it 5 stars. It was really detailed about Carlo's life as well as the things he was interested in, especially the Eucharistic miracles. And I would say that if you are a teen or an adult who's looking for kind of an overview of his life, this is a really great book to start with, and it's pretty short. The next book I also read as an ebook, and this is also by Sierra Godfrey, who was the author of The Second Chance Hotel, and this was a very typical family. Let's see if it'll focus. There we go. A very typical family. This one was not a romance. It was contemporary fiction. It does have a slightly romance side plot to it. But I picked this one up because I liked Second Chance Hotel so well. And these are the only 2 books by this author. So I'm hoping for more soon because I did enjoy them both. Here's the description for this one. All families are messy, some are disasters. Natalie Walker is the reason her older brother and sister went to prison over 15 years ago. She fled California shortly after that fateful night and hasn't spoken to anyone in her family since. Now, on the same day her boyfriend steals her dream job out from under her, Natalie receives a letter from a lawyer saying her estranged mother has died and left the family's historic Santa Cruz house to her. Sort of. The only way for Natalie and her siblings to inherit it is for all 3 adult children to come back together and claim it. Natalie drives cross-country to Santa Cruz with her willful cat in tow, expecting to sign some papers, see siblings Lynn and Jake briefly, and get back to sorting out her life in Boston. But Jake, now an award-winning ornithologist, is missing, and Lynn, working as an undertaker in New York City, shows up with a teenage son. While Natalie and her nephew look for Jake, meeting a very handsome marine biologist who immediately captures her heart, she unpacks the guilt she has held onto for so many years, wondering how or if she can salvage a relationship with her siblings after all this time. This was a great read. I would say it's also a good, road trip read, although it does have some pretty heavy topics in it. Highly recommend it. I don't think there's much else I can tell you about the book because it'll spoil so many plot points so early on, but this book reads like a really good family drama TV show. There's heavy things being addressed, there's a lot of character interactions, and a lot of old backstories to dig up, but it was very, very good. I highly recommend it. The next book I also read as an ebook, and this was Thank You for Listening by Julia Wellen. This is a romantic comedy, again. This one, I gave it 4 stars initially. I think I really should have given it 3 because there were some things I was a little held up on. This one also pulled me in because it was available, and I liked kind of the twist to it. I do appreciate when contemporary romance books have a really unique hook to get people to read. So like the one with the little library. This one, the main character is an audiobook narrator, which I thought was really cool. And I liked seeing a little peek behind the scenes at the audiobook narration industry. But I'll get more into some stuff I didn't like in a few minutes. Here's the description. For Sawani Chester, being an audiobook narrator is a long way from her old dreams. But the days of being a star on film sets are long behind her. She's found success and satisfaction from the inside of a sound booth, and it allows her to care for her beloved ailing grandmother. When she arrives in Las Vegas last minute for a book convention, Sawani unexpectedly spends a whirlwind night with a charming stranger. On her return home, Sawani discovers one of the world's most beloved romance novelists wants her to perform her last book, with Brock McKnight, the industry's hottest, most secretive voice. Sawani doesn't buy what romance novels are selling, not after her own dreams were tragically cut short, and she stopped narrating them years ago. But her admiration of the late author and the opportunity to get her grandmother more help makes her decision for her. As Sawani begins to work on the book, resurrecting her old romance pseudonym, she and Brock forge a real connection, hidden behind the comfort of anonymity. Soon she is dreaming again, but the secrets are revealed and the realities of life come crashing down around her once more. If she can learn to risk everything for desires she has long buried, she will discover a world of intimacy and acceptance she never believed would be hers. So, again, really good kind of twist hook to get you into reading. You'll also notice that there's a one-night stand in this book. This one, I think, made more sense with the plot line. Still didn't love it. The other issue I had with this book is, while I appreciate that it was technically a closed-door romance, you don't actually see the characters doing anything intimate on the page. They are audiobook narrators, specifically romance audiobook narrators. So there are scenes where they are reading the script of an audiobook, and those scripts have intimate scenes. So it was... It technically met my preference of being a closed-door book. However, since they were still talking about it, I don't think it actually meets that qualification. Although they did it with humor, and I can imagine that if you are an audiobook narrator and end up doing projects like this, it can be really awkward to get through. However, I kind of didn't love that. I think those same jokes could have been made without actually putting the words on the page. But again, that is my preference. Overall, I thought the characters were really well written. I liked kind of the atmosphere to everything. It was a fine, quick read, but again, I prefer truly closed-door romances, and this technically wasn't it. The next book I read was a nonfiction book, and this one I borrowed from a friend, and it's called Bad Therapy: Why the Kids Aren't Growing Up by Abigail Schreier. And this one I read kind of just with the perspective of an educator, noticing that there's a lot of anxiety in our current culture, in kids, in families. It's very present. This one I'm not going to read the whole description of because it's really, really long. But basically the premise of the book is the author, Abigail Schreier, is investigating why we have so much anxiety and why kids aren't moving on from the things that make them anxious. And it talks a lot about how we as a society should be working with kids to overcome and to build a resilience and not to kind of sit in the things that make us anxious. Addressing them and talking about them is good, but continuously kind of digging into a hole of those things that make us anxious doesn't help kids move on from those anxieties. So it was very good. I found it very interesting to read as an educator, although I think the kind of target demographic was more parents. But I highly recommend it, especially if you were kind of noticing the same things in your own communities. The last book that I read in October is my only physical book for this one, and this was The Night House by Jo Nesbo. I gave this one 4 stars, and it was a good, like, atmospheric horror, I would say. Here's the description. In the wake of his parents' tragic deaths in a house fire, 14-year-old Richard Eleved has been sent to live with his aunt and uncle in the remote insular town of Ballantine. Richard quickly earns a reputation as an outcast, and when a classmate named Tom goes missing, everyone suspects the new angry boy is responsible for his disappearance. No one believes him when he says the telephone booth out by the edge of the woods sucked Tom into the receiver like something out of a horror movie. No one, that is, except Karen, a beguiling fellow outsider who encourages Richard to pursue clues the police refuse to investigate. His sleuthing leads him to an abandoned house in the Mirror Forest, where he catches a glimpse of terrifying faces in the window. And then the voices begin to whisper in his ear. She's going to burn. The girl you love is going to burn. There's nothing you can do about it. When another classmate disappears, Richard must find a way to prove his innocence and preserve his sanity as he grapples with the dark magic that is possessing Ballantine and pursuing his destruction. Then again, Richard may not be the most reliable narrator of his own story. This very much gave me season 1 Stranger Things vibes with the spooky house, the phone that eats people. It's just a, now I'm forgetting what country he's from. He's from Oslo, so Norway. It's a translated book, so I would guess Scandinavian Stranger Things is what this was. Really great kind of atmospheric, spooky Halloween read, which is exactly why I read it. I finished this on October 29th. Highly recommend it if you're looking for a quick, fast-paced horror read. Although I realize we're a little past the season for that, but some people read those year-round. But if you are looking for a good, short-ish, spooky book, I would recommend this one. That's it for this month. Definitely more reading than the last couple months, which is good. I think by the end of October, I was at like 84 books read for the year, which is pretty good. It's since jumped up quite a bit because I've been reading a lot of children's books for work. But we'll get into those in the next reading episode of this podcast. For today, we're going to call it done. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you heard something in this episode that inspired you to read or go check out a book from your local library. And if you liked what you heard today, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below so you can be notified of all my content right here on YouTube. I do a lot of crafty things and a lot of book-related things, so make sure you check it out. And if you want to follow me on other social media sites, that information will be in the description box below. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.